Andrew Saturn. Andrew ran for Public Utility District Commissioner in Thurston County in 2018. He is a socialist, and I will let you, Andrew, go ahead and give yourself a little bit more of an introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a writer, I'm a designer, I'm a union tech worker, formerly at Boeing under SPEA. Boeing laid a bunch of people off recently, if you didn't know. I post a lot on the internet, and as you said, I'm a former candidate. In 2018, I ran for Public Utilities Commissioner, and I'm now the treasurer of Puget Sound Socialist Party. And we also have a podcast called Socialism Train, where we talk about socialism in trains mainly.
Yeah, awesome. So where would people go to find your new podcast?
Just on Twitter right now, at Socialism Train. PSSP.us is our party website. We don't have a website for the podcast just yet. Same as you, we're new to this.
Yeah.
I'm very technical, but audio is a little tricky sometimes, as you've figured out.
Yes.
We have some podcasts recorded, but
awesome,
because of our newness to audio recording and producing, have had some audio quality issues and glitches. So when I say we, I mean me, trying to work that out and produce something that's at least acceptable quality for people. But we should have a couple new episodes coming out tonight or tomorrow. But yeah, it's podcasting, I think, is pretty cool in that you can share your ideas without having to type it all out. But a lot of times I think these days people don't want to spend a lot of time reading something. But if you're, commuting, you're on the bus or a train or even driving, you can listen to a podcast and it's more digestible. Same goes with video content, I think. So it's good to see a lot of people, especially on the left, socialists or progressives or whatever, branching out into podcasting. And, I think the arena is kind of dominated by more of a center-right voice or even a right-wing voice. If you look at more traditional like radio, stuff like that. Or even just more consumerist stuff like sports or whatever. So it's really cool, in my opinion, to see some more regular working people get into it.
Yeah, definitely. I was just talking about earlier, I had a poll on what I should do with the channel, and folks seem all about local content. And that makes a lot of sense because you got about 1 million content producers talking about national stuff. And a lot less about local stuff, especially from a leftist perspective in a lot of areas.
Yeah, you have so few people talking about, specifically in Olympia, not just Olympia politics, but the state, Washington's politics happening in Olympia. No one's really talking about it from a left perspective. There are a few podcasts hosted by people who are literally lobbyists or, op-ed writers for the Olympian or something like that, but they're sharing their, pretty center-right opinion and just kind of acting as if that's as far left as you can go in Olympia. But I think there's so much room to go, more talking about working class issues and talking about it from a materialist point of view than more of a kind of the typical thing you'll see on the furthest left in a podcast at this level is someone talking about your run-of-the-mill Democratic talking points. So,
right. I just pulled up on the video here your Socialism Train account here, and I'm just clicking over to PSSP webpage. You want to tell folks a little bit about Puget Sound Socialist Party? What's the background there? When did that start? And tell me a little bit about Puget Sound Socialist Party.
So officially, it was founded a few years ago as a chartered local of the Socialist Party, which is, that dates back 100 years, the Socialist Party, with Eugene Debs and people like that. But here in Washington State specifically, it says far back as like early 1900s again, but people don't realize it's pretty much the same party. And there was a split in the 70s where We had Socialist Party USA come out of one side, more kind of what I would call like a traditional socialist, whether that's Marxism or whatever, more electoral party. And then the other side of that was Democratic Socialists of America, which isn't a party. It's more of a membership organization, and they have more of a focus on whatever you want to call it, like an inside-outside strategy. So they work more along the lines of endorsing Democrats.
Right.
So, your AOCs or Bernie Sanders, whereas we don't do that. We're strictly socialist. We don't endorse Democrats.
Right. Am I correct? I believe the Socialist Party nationally has endorsed Howie Hawkins, the Green candidate. Do you know if that's right?
No, that's true. Yep.
That's
Howie
the same
Hawkins,
Socialist Party
that
this is affiliated with? Okay.
Gotcha. Yep. Howie Hawkins is running in most places on the Green Party ballot.
Right.
Because, you have access to the state ballot that way. But he is a socialist. He's specifically an eco-socialist. Right. He was one of the early founders of the Green Party. He invented the Green New Deal, that whole concept. I could talk more about Howie Hawkins if you'd like, specifically.
Sure. What do you think his prospects are in terms of building the Green Party into to continue growing and building a coalition there?
Pretty good. It's always going to be a struggle for working people to take on the corporate duopoly of the Republicans and the Democrats, because even though they play this game of, we're totally different. They're the red team, we're the blue team. In reality, they're the exact same thing. They always fight for the exact same thing, and that's corporate control and wealth. They fight for capital. They don't fight for working people. The Green Party traditionally has been more in line with like DSA, where they tend to support Democrats who are environmentally conscious. But what I've seen personally since at least, Bernie Sanders getting into the race and Jill Stein back in 2015, 2016, you're seeing more of a leftist attitude within the Green Party. And Howie Hawkins being one of the founders, he's always been a socialist. And I think there's always been a branch of the Green Party that's been socialist. But seeing the Green Party move more in a direction of outright calling themselves an eco-socialist party.
I believe they do now, right? They had a resolution a few years ago.
Yep. And I think that's exciting because, much like the Socialist Party, they are a party. It's not just an organization.
Right.
So they can get on the ballot and run candidates. And in many cases, the Green Party has ballot access because they're getting, 5, 6, 7% of the vote in a presidential election. So they can get their candidates on the ballot in states where you have to have ballot access to get on the ballot for your party.
Right.
Here in Washington, we don't technically have parties. We're a nonpartisan state officially. So you can put anything you want when you run for office. You can put, party time party or whatever, and the Secretary of State will accept it.
All you need to do to know that is read any of the voter guides
exactly
in any of our general elections, and shout out to your Twitter handle.
Bad Space
Guy, right? Because
the perennial candidate,
Washington
Good Space Guy.
Voters who have read those pamphlets know where that's from.
Good Space Guy's our perennial candidate up in Seattle who runs on who knows what, kind of a libertarian, kind of a right-wing platform, but he, for better or for worse, runs every year for something. The closest he's come to getting elected was getting about a third of the vote for the Port of Seattle, which was pretty frightening.
Pretty good. I think maybe this is a good time to just really briefly mention Howie Hawkins' campaign Twitter account was recently suspended.
They said he was impersonating himself.
Yeah, which really just says, well, we just consider you like a lowly peasant, and you're not worthy of our time to really review what's going on here with your campaign, and
I think
treating you like an actual candidate,
I think the mask is off in terms of Twitter.
Sure.
The people who run Twitter are very much, they donate to very corporate interests, Koch brothers and stuff like that, they often will do this sort of thing where they're like, oops, we accidentally banned the leftist account. Meanwhile, you've got people on the right who are posting threats and racist tweets and all kinds of crazy stuff, and they're verified. And it's almost, it's an endorsement of whatever they're posting. And I mean, if you want to get crazy, the president, like, he's tweeting all this crazy stuff. He's retweeting posts from literal Nazis and literal,
the same Twitter where Trump is trying to incite civil war.
Right. They're shutting down. Yeah, exactly.
It's ridiculous. So
there's another podcast that's pretty cool called What's Left. And one of the hosts, Amy Therese, was banned from Twitter for posting, "We have to beat Elizabeth Warren." And they said that she was inciting violence, but she meant electorally, like beat her in an election, in the primary.
Yeah.
So it's just stupid, because then other people posted, "We have to beat, whoever," and those people didn't get banned. So it's like, who?
Yeah, it's always inconsistent, and a lot of times, just it's a vector for, implicit bias and
exactly
things like that.
It's a gatekeeping mechanism.
I'll say something, FTP or something like that, and I'll never hear a word about it. But other people are getting banned for posting the exact same thing. But they're black or whatever,
right?
And, well, and I mean, it's always inconsistent.
I think you could be like the devil's advocate and say, well, it's the algorithm, and people are just abusing the algorithm, and you have whatever you want to call it, brigading or whatever, where you've got 50, 100, 200 people reporting the person at the same time, and then it overloads the algorithm. Right. And then the algorithm assumes it must be correct because all these random people are doing it, even though they're organizing elsewhere, whether it's a chat room or Reddit or whatever. But at the same time,
especially now with COVID-19, right? Because you have all these warnings on YouTube and so forth saying, oh, by the way, we don't have any staff looking at this right now. So just sorry, the robot's word is the final word.
But what I'm getting at is, like, you can make that defense of Twitter and say, it's just the robot doing it. But how come the robot never does that for right-wing people or corporate people or verified accounts or anything when these people are posting insane stuff?
The algorithm is also a vector for implicit bias of the people who write the algorithm, of course.
Yeah. The guy who founded McAfee, the antivirus company, he's widely known as kind of a kook. He says crazy stuff all the time. He's on Twitter. He's verified. It was, I don't know, a month ago, he posted this just blatantly racist thing about, like, black women are all like this or something, like, just like some kind of crazy blanket statement. It was up for weeks before someone brought it up to the founder of Twitter, like, face to face, and he was like, oh, I'll look into that. And then they forced him to delete the tweet. He didn't get banned from Twitter. He just had to delete that one tweet. So it's, the rules only apply to certain people, and that goes for both on Twitter and in person. I think you have,
right, of course,
the rules were designed not to make things fair for everybody, but to keep the playing field unlevel. So, you'll always see that. And I think the only solution there, not to get off on a tangent, but
go for it.
We're never going to have fairness or democracy with a lowercase d on social media, because these platforms are invented to sell ads. So these are ad platforms.
Yep.
They're not there for you. They're there for corporations. Same goes for, like, the local news or the national news. They're never going to be fair to a certain politician that you like, because they're not there to be fair and share the news. They're there to sell ads. And those ads are going to stop rolling in the minute they start being fair, because those corporations who buy those ads don't want those politicians to be getting coverage. And I think as soon as, regular working people starts to click, you just got to get your information from a source that you trust, that isn't bought. And unfortunately, to get that sort of exposure, you need to use these platforms. So it's just this sort of, catch-22 where you can't ever do it. So we've got to find a way to have our own platforms that aren't corporate dominated.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking about that the other day on Twitter with because just social media in general, not just the media, but also just social media and everybody, it's really, people have tried to get folks on a independent social media site in mass, but it's just really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll
And
never be able to
because you
force
just get
someone.
the critical mass on Facebook and so on, and then it's so hard to fight that momentum with an independent platform. So I don't know what the solution is, but I feel like that is just a critical part of the political revolution that has been often overlooked. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
and
there's
I don't know what the
platforms like
answer is.
Mastodon or whatever.
Right. But
But
how do
I
you,
think
yeah,
it's hard to use. There's a really steep learning curve
sure.
and it doesn't make sense to a lot of people because it's decentralized. But,
Right.
and I mean, it's the other side of that is, does social media even matter in terms of
Sure.
getting a message out? Because, I've got 3,000 followers on Facebook and I'm verified on Facebook, but people never see my posts.
Right.
The algorithm magically
Right.
keeps them hidden from people. Or you look at a candidate like Josh Collins, who's running for the 10th congressional
Yeah.
district.
Hmm.
He's got thousands of followers. I don't even know at this point, tens of thousands. But will
Yeah.
that translate into
Let me
votes
pull
and
it up.
support?
Let's see where he's at.
But my
Um,
point there is, like, are his votes, or I'm sorry, are his posts and his message actually reaching voters that will vote in his district?
right.
Like, does it actually translate? And I saw that in my campaign. We had thousands of supporters online, but that didn't necessarily translate to your everyday regular working person.
Right. And obviously the big example hanging over everyone right now with that is Bernie Sanders, because he had this massive movement. He had record-breaking number of volunteers on the phones and door knocking. He had DSA door knocking. He had huge social media leads over all the other candidates. And then who does he lose to? He loses to Joe Biden, the guy that doesn't even campaign, who doesn't know how to use social media, who doesn't know how to live stream. Like
Yeah.
how,
Well, Joe Biden
what?
didn't even have a campaign office in
Right.
California.
So yeah, oof.
And I think what you see there is you've got these like patronage networks. Same thing happened in my campaign, where you do all this work on the ground, you knock on all the doors, you make all the
Yeah,
phone calls, but your opponent will spend $50,000 sending a
right.
postcard 3 days before the election, and the person who doesn't have the time to dedicate to spending,
Yeah,
researching the election is going to get that postcard, and it says all these good things on it. And they get called low information voters, but I think what they are is just like, they don't have the time. They're busy
right.
working. It's
Yeah,
not a thing where they're not
I
doing
agree
enough.
with that. Yeah,
It's that they just, who has the time? We have the time because we're lucky, whether we have a good enough job or we have a good work life balance. Most people don't have a normal 40-hour week. They have, you know, their schedules all over the place. They're working 60 hours a week, two jobs, who knows? And then they've got to do childcare. They've got to
been
do
there, done
all this
that.
other crap. Right.
Yeah,
They don't have
totally.
time to sit on the internet and research Bernie Sanders' position on every little thing and then compare that to the 30 other candidates who are running and decide who they think they'll vote for. And then on top of that, say you do have this mass support, uh, whether they want to admit it or not, there's still screwed up elections happening, whether
Right.
it's downright fraud, which I don't think happens so much. I don't think they're literally not counting the votes. I think it's just they're so bad at their jobs. Uh, the counting machines may not be calibrated correctly. They may be set up
Right.
wrong. Not even that so much as the just disenfranchisement, where you've got states where, under coronavirus, you're expecting people to go stand in line for 7 hours. That's insane.
Yeah.
Even if we didn't have a pandemic going on right now, same issue. The people who are working 60 hours a week don't have time to go stand in line. They don't have
Right.
time to, often, even if in a state like Washington with your mail-in ballot, people forget. I've had
Yeah.
normal friends of mine who, they're kind of political. They have really good opinions on things, but they get their ballot, they throw it on the table, and then a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, they totally forget, and then it's election day, and they're like, "Oh crap," you know. And
Right.
then
Oh,
it's like, "Well,
absolutely.
I've got to go work, and I don't get off work till 9 p.m. When am I going to have time to go fill out this ballot and then go find a drop box?" So we've
Right.
got,
Or hey, I moved 3 times this year and I don't remember which one I'm registered to and I forgot to update it.
exactly. I have friends who are political. They moved. They did update their voter registration. Their ballot never showed up. They reached out to the Secretary of State. They said, "Oh, you have to come down to Olympia in
Right.
person with your ID and fill out this form to get your ballot, which may or may not be counted because it's a special ballot. It's provisional."
Provisional
It's
ballots.
it's
Yeah.
insane. There's no reason voting should be this hard. So I think, like I
Right.
said, to circle back to like Bernie's massive support, not necessarily translating to votes. I think you've got those factors, and then you've got, like in the South, for example, you've got these patronage networks where they have, someone makes a phone call like Barack Obama, and suddenly you've got 100, 200, 1,000 people on the ground going and knocking on doors saying, vote for Joe Biden because he's the guy the Democrats are supporting. And these same thing, the people who don't have the time to go research are going to go, "Oh, I trust this guy. He told me to
Yeah.
vote for Joe Biden." So even though Bernie's reaching these people, Bernie doesn't have that establishment support that can go and make
Yeah.
things happen.
And, the capitalist Democrats needed a boost this time. So, hey, Michael Bloomberg,
Right. No, I mean,
hook
you've
us
got,
up. And
yeah.
he did. And,
Well, that was even going back to before the election. There were people who were maybe critical of Bloomberg, and suddenly they get a check from Bloomberg for their nonprofit or whatever, and then that
right.
criticism magically disappears. So it's always going to be this uphill battle, and I think it's got to click one day that you're not going to you can't. I've always said it's like, this is like a dumb nerd reference, but you're not going to reform the empire from the inside. Like, you're not gonna. It's one thing to, like, you have the Rebel Alliance and they go shoot the Death Star, right? It would be like saying, like, no, we need to join and become stormtroopers, and then we can convince all the stormtroopers to, like, that's stupid. That's never going to happen. There are these people in the party who are just like ride or die. They're in it for the money and the clout. They're not in it because they have a belief system. So you're never going to convince these people. As long as there's money and there's corporate influence, they're never going to just, have a deep moment where they realize that they're doing these terrible things, because they don't connect it. They don't care. The people at the top, they don't care. They're getting paid. So it's not personal. It's just that they're living their lives. So we really got to have a mass worker movement. And I think, again, to circle back to the Green Party stuff, if that's through the Green Party, that's great. Shama Solan up in Seattle always says we need to have like a green-red alliance when it comes to socialism and environmentalists and workers, even like a blue, green, red, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
All these people really
like
need to realize
the groundwork for that is there now.
Well, it's always been there. I just think it's that people don't. You're being fed this idea. We have the numbers. I think it's that people are fed this. You've got idealism versus materialism. So you can be on the left or whatever, but if you're an idealist and you think our circumstances are caused by our ideas and the way we think and the words we use, that's just a stupid kind of dead end way of thinking, where they split up the working class into these different little categories, and then these little categories fight against each other. So, all the way back to civil rights movement, you had feminists and then you had black people fighting for rights, right? But they were fighting different fights. Even though those fights were the same fight, there were people who had to choose between being a feminist and then being in the civil rights movement. So you'd often have this clash, and you're basically just dividing your resources. So I don't want to get on this huge rant about all that stuff, but it's, like you look at Martin Luther King, when he was getting into talking about workers' rights and sanitation workers' rights, that's when he really started getting the threats on his life, because he started becoming such a huge threat, uniting all of these working people together, because, the black struggle is the women's struggle, is the working class struggle. It's all the same struggle. Unless you're a millionaire or billionaire, you're working class. And so it's really got to be a class materialist struggle going forward. And people, I just really hope people start to get it. You're not going to get anywhere supporting someone like Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren, because they're always going to default to the corporate, center right politics of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, no, I think we're on the same page on all that. What anything else you want to talk about here?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know how much time you had. I mean, I can talk all day.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, I'm excited about a bunch of campaigns coming up. Like I said, Joshua Collins.
yep.
I hope his Twitter following translates to support. Rebecca Parsons running on ending homelessness.
Yep.
She's running. I believe she's running as a Democrat as well, not a socialist. She says she's like a working class business owner, so I'm not sure. But much like AOC, if that's like the gateway to get people into working class politics, then I'm all for it.
Right.
And I mean, I'll take that any day over, say a right winger or whatever who's gonna just, get into Congress and do these goofy wedge issues about abortion and immigration and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope this whole coronavirus thing is scaring a lot of people. But luckily, it was announced, I believe today, Washington State unemployment is extended by I don't know what it was. Let me look really quick here. It was an extra 13 weeks, and people are going to get an extra $600 a week, and they no longer have to keep a journal of their job search. So there's no
really?
longer, yeah,
Okay.
there's no longer that qualification of, like a means test. You just, you don't have a job, here's money.
Yeah, which is how it should be. Anyone
Exactly.
who's gone through unemployment, it knows it's it's a headache. Like you've
Yep.
got a pile of forms and then you forgot to sign one form, so now you've got a whole, half hour on hold and some more forms and
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So the extra 13 weeks is definitely going to help a bunch of people.
Right.
That's an extra, give or take it a few days. That's an extra 3 months over the normal 26 weeks of benefits you get on unemployment, depending on how long you worked.
Right. And there's been some updates recently to the housing situation in Washington too. Still obviously way weaker than what we need, and everyone should go pressure Jay Inslee to do a rent freeze and to cancel rent. But there have been some updates recently. I think so there was a rent increase freeze. Landlords
I
can't
think they need to just cancel rent and mortgages altogether.
some things like that. But yeah, so keep the pressure on Jay Inslee to do more on housing, because it seems like he has been feeling the pressure and is trying to kind of throw people a bone, but
I don't think it's
keep
enough
pushing
though,
on that.
honestly.
Oh,
I think,
no,
it
not
might
at
be
all.
easier reaching out to people who have regulatory authority, like the insurance commissioner. The insurance commissioner can cancel insurance requirements. He can cancel copays and deductibles. He can cancel
Interesting.
yeah.
I hadn't thought
Because
about that.
the insurance commissioner regulates the insurance industry for the state
Right.
and has the authority to just blanket say, I'm capping all monthly premiums to $100. He has that authority.
Right.
And I really wish this isn't going to be over in a month or 2 months. This is going to be the rest of this year at the very least, if not at this time next year.
Yeah.
Like we're looking at, this is going to be like a thing where it's like it's Corona season, much like the flu. And even after we have a vaccine, like it's going to be this recurring thing. And this is just one virus. Like this isn't the end of pandemics. We've had them for thousands of years, and they're not going away. The only difference now is we have modern medicine. So I really hope our elected and appointed officials really use their authority to help working people, because the working people are the ones who are out buying things and sustaining the economy. When they don't have money to buy stuff, the economy crashes, everything tumbles. So I really, there's some people who are accelerationist and want that to happen. I don't think that's really a great idea. I really just, like I said, what they did with unemployment is a good first step.
I think, folks that are interested in politics really need to be careful not to be throwing anybody under the bus.
Right. I mean, you've got
you know.
it's a great idea for a movie, but in reality,
Yeah.
you're
So,
talking about millions of people dying. Is
right.
really what that means. So,
Yeah.
uh, I really, like I said, I like that we're getting, at least in Washington State, people who are unemployed right now are going to get some extra money. They're going to be
Yeah.
able to make their rent because they haven't canceled rent for some reason yet. But I really, like I said, hope it goes further. I've got myself, I have insurance to pay. My premium is like $500 a month, basically. So this
Right.
extra money is really going to help cover those bills. So
Yeah.
it's a good first step. But I hope everyone out there stays safe and washes their hands. Try not
Yeah,
to cough on
absolutely.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have this protest at the Capitol today,
Oh, geez.
and I haven't gone into that. I haven't looked up how that ended up going, because you never know with these right wingers. Like, sometimes they've got 10,000 people RSVP'd on Facebook, and then five of them show up
Well,
and then
yeah.
get chased off. But you never
Did
know.
you see that it was called Liberty or Death Rally? And I was pretty much like, well, you're going to get one of
Huh.
those things, but not the other. But yeah, it's and I mean, I'm a socialist. I support gun rights. I'm in the Socialist Rifle Association.
Hmm.
Uh, no one's going to take your guns away. This is about like people not dying. So anyone
Right.
who's listening, who's maybe not, you know, on the left or whatever, this coronavirus thing. There's this idea that like the government is shutting things down and it's like the new world order and blah blah blah. Like they're doing the bare minimum. They're not even doing enough.
Yeah.
If you really think this is bad, like just imagine what it would be like if they were doing a good job.
Right. Oh
No
yeah.
one's taking anyone's guns away.
There's so
It's
much fear
ridiculous.
mongering over socialism that
It's not even
that
socialism, though.
no,
It's just
exactly,
basics. It's a
exactly.
basic
And
safety
but
net.
and in the brainwashing train of thought, though,
Well,
it's
they
just like
conflate liberalism and socialism.
the farther to the left you go, the more authoritarian.
Oh.
And and that's just, we need to be clear about where we're at on that, is the
There's an article on our website.
anti-authoritarian left.
There's an article on our website, and it's literally just called "What is Socialism?" and it
Right.
talks about snowplows are not socialism.
Right.
The things the
Yeah,
government
there's
does.
a ton of that that whole meme of like,
It's
socialism for the rich when we give them a tax break.
No,
And
that's welfare
that's
for the
not
rich.
what that is.
Yeah. No, it's not. Socialism is worker ownership and control of the
Right.
means of production, which translates to basically you and me have a say democratically in what goes on in our lives. So that means, worker co-ops or actual democratic control of the government. So
Which is by definition democratic and anti-authoritarian.
right, lowercase d democratic.
Right.
So that doesn't mean snowplows. That doesn't mean roads. That doesn't mean trains. That can translate into those things because when working people have democratic control, they tend to want to do basic public services and public good. And it's not. Thomas Paine was like a founding father of this country, and he advocated for the public commons, public good. That doesn't mean socialism. So it's actually crazy because Thomas Paine is this, at least seen as this like right wing kind of liberty or death kind of figure. But he wrote The Rights of Man, and he wrote like this pamphlet that talked about basically a modest proposal, which people should look up. These are crazy leftist ideas by that time standard. So for people today to say like, oh, snowplows are socialism, like, no, that's not socialism. That's just the bare minimum of doing what should be done by a government. That's what a government does. That's what living in a modern society means. It just means, it works. The system works if all of our sewers are connected. That's really all it means. It's crazy to me that there are people who think, not living like the Unabomber in a shed out in the woods makes you some kind of like socialist. So I don't know. That's a whole separate episode. You can go down that route. But I really think there's an opportunity to talk to what you would consider like a right winger or a Trump supporter, because there's a lot of overlap in the ideas, I think, of what it means to be free or to have liberty or whatever. Where I think right wingers have their own kind of identity politics,
Right.
where they have a flawed analysis of what the solution to our everyday problems means, and they see it as, these dumb there are wedge issues on the left and there are wedge issues on the right that are used to divide up the working class, in my opinion. And I think if you take all of that dumb stuff away, that accounts for like 1% to 2% of people's opinions, it's pretty much the same ideas, right and left, amongst the working class. People just want to have a comfortable living. They want to take care of their kids. They want to feed their kids. They want to be happy and safe and basic stuff like that.
Don't want to be
and I think it's
by
just
corruption.
Yeah, and the difference is on the right, they're brainwashed or led to believe this identity politics of, there's a socialist plot to take away your guns and to take away your house and to take away your car. And no, it's not a socialist plot. That's the corporate plot.
Right. Yeah. And that's how I try to frame that conversation as well, is that, with libertarian leaning folks and things like that, is that the reality is that who has the big power right now is these oligarchs and their corporations and whatnot. And what's your strategy for fighting them? And what are you going to do except for socialism that is able to fight those corporations and those oligarchs? What's your other plan? Because I don't see it. And that's why we need the socialism, is because we got to go fight those extremely powerful oligarchs. And
all socialism means is workers uniting to have collective power. It doesn't mean we take your toothbrush away.
Right.
Like people conflate personal property and private property. Under socialism, there wouldn't be private property. You wouldn't have corporations like Nestle going into California and buying up acres of land and siphoning off all the water into bottles. Right. That doesn't mean you personally wouldn't have your land with your well on it and your family, and you could do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I think that basic stuff like that is just, again, we could go off on a whole episode talking about that stuff, but I think there's ground to cover and kind of talking to right-wing people, especially Trump supporters, who see Trump as the way or the solution to these problems, when they're being led by this demagogue who just is taking advantage of prejudice or whatever, things that they're also being told are the problem. And labeling these people as deplorable and just saying they're dumb and uneducated only reinforces those ideas. So I think there's a lot to be said about leftists and right-wing people who are working class coming together on the things they agree about. So I'm not saying we should go take over the Republican Party or the Libertarians or whatever, but there's a lot of overlap amongst a lot of regular working people and their ideas.
If we focus on class consciousness and class solidarity.
Exactly. Instead of this identity thing, because the identity thing, everyone's got a different identity, a different thing they believe on these little tiny issues. But overall, most people believe in the exact same things. Right. So what I'm saying is, you're never gonna, even on the left, you've got dozens and dozens of different ideas. Often these disparate ideas that don't make any sense. I've had people tell me when I was running for office, "Oh, I'd support you, except I think you're going to raise taxes because you talked about how you think we should have light rail coming into Olympia, and look at what happened in Pierce County, where basically talking about Tim Eyman stuff and talking about car tabs." And I'm like, and this is someone who's also a Bernie supporter.
Right.
So it's just, you're never going to have anyone agree on all of the things all the time. You got to focus on the things you can agree on. And I think that's working class
and especially in the context of what we're trying to do now, I guess, right? If we're trying to build like a major left coalition party out of the Green Party, we're dealing with that, because people have an idea of what the Green Party is and who's been involved, and maybe quibbling over this little issue or that little issue. And we really need to refocus it on the big picture
Yeah.
and find the common ground and focus on that. And
No,
we're just going
that's
to constantly have to refocus on that.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying basically you can't focus on these identity issues or these kind of more liberal kind of talking points. Those are, whether it's intentional or not, they're designed to divide people up. And when people are divided up, they get very, tribal or sectarian or whatever you want to call it. And you just have a million little groups who are never going to work together. If you focus on these class issues, most people are working class. Most people don't get paid enough. Most people can't make rent sometimes, or are living paycheck to paycheck, or are one emergency away from going bankrupt. That's the things. And I think Bernie's campaign, when he focused on that stuff, is really when he took off. When he started talking about open borders and, more identity-based issues that are very unclear, and he started talking about just these vague concepts, is really when he started to lose a lot of people. And I'm not saying that's what caused him to lose. Like I said, I think it had more to do with the rigging of the elections, forcing people to go out and vote. Like, I think that's why he dropped out. He didn't want people to literally go stand in line.
Right.
Bernie Sanders didn't want people to die so he could become president.
And he saw that the other campaign was
they're willing to sacrifice people. Exactly.
Right.
But what I'm getting at is, I think if Bernie he's a figure, but his ideas can apply to anybody. Right. We don't need one figure or one person to lead us into, whatever you want to call it. Eugene Debs said, if you can be let in, you can be let out again. You need to lead yourself. So I think the big thing is education. And I think the big thing for that is having a party that is focused on working class issues, whether that is the Green Party or the Socialist Party or, whatever, some other organization, some new party that gets formed. That's really, I think, the key to at least winning elections and winning over, winning, what am I getting at? Victories for working people.
Yeah.
Getting these changes we need, it may not be electoral. It may be literally, getting people organized. Because you look at like the 70s, we had Black Panthers, feeding children and sheltering people, stuff like that. They didn't do that by winning elections or by convincing a city council to do something. They did it by organizing and just doing it. And I think organization is really the key to educate the people and empower the people.
Yeah. So
whether that's through a party or whatever, that's really what I think is key. And I think Bernie started that, at least in these, past 10-year time span for a lot of people, millennials, whatever. But it's never going to be done by just a one figure kind of person. So absolutely. Bernie dropping out shouldn't be the end of this. I think people should empower themselves in their community. Phase. Right.
Yep.
But you can't wait for one person. And I think a lot of people are making the mistake of saying, well, who do we support now? And it's like, it's not about one person.
Right.
So go support Howie Hawkins, whatever. But Howie isn't going to win. Sorry to break it to people.
Right.
But Howie can continue a movement. Other people can continue a movement. It's about a movement. It's about
right.
The idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And uniting the class consciousness, and then also, of course, the demographic shifts over time, and and being prepared for that change, because the younger generations are pretty radical, and things are changing, and
well, I'm a millennial technically, I think.
Yeah, me too.
And we're the first generation to not have it better than our parents.
Right.
And then, you've got the generation after us, Zoomers or whatever, the younger people coming up now through high school and college. And these are people who have grown up with, a more sophisticated internet information at their fingertips, even more so than we had, because our generation, when we were younger, there was no Google.
Right.
So these kids are growing up now. They've got Google. They've got all this stuff. and they're seeing what we're seeing, and they're even more radical than we are. So I think things are going to get worse, but things are going to get better in a way that people are going to be more empowered, more educated, and more radical when it comes to stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's a good note to end on, I think. And so, yeah, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up. But I really appreciate you coming on and just chatting. And
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I've got your Twitter here, so listeners, you can go follow Andrew on Twitter at Bad Space Guy. Check out at Socialism Train as well, the podcast. I listened to the first episode the other day. It's pretty good. I'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah,
And
like I said, we have 2 coming out because we had to fix a bunch of audio
right.
glitches, so they're late, but
Yeah.
they're both going to be at the same time.
So go check out Socialism Train, and hopefully we can do this again sometime in the future. And yeah, check out Puget Sound Socialist Party as well.
Yeah, we're on Twitter as well. Puget SPUSA, I believe.
Right. And I'll put some links in the
all the
comments when I
memes.
post the replay video here on YouTube.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks, Andrew, and have a good one.
You too.
All right. Later. All right, everybody. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. And didn't quite get to all the stories and things I had today. Bit unorganized here, but we'll come back next week. So drop a comment. Let me know what you want to talk about next week. Let me know what's going on. Send me memes. Send me links to articles. Send me music or a local craft or anything you want me to share on the stream, anything like that. Just let me know. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week. Love and peace.